My family abandoned me in a coma, until they discovered the $950 million secret I was hiding. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps. That was the first thing I noticed when my eyes finally cracked open. Not the sterile white ceiling, not the 4 drips snaking into my arm, but that relentless, mechanical hum that told me I was somewhere I didn't want to be. My body felt like it belonged to someone else. Heavy. Distant. Wrong. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my ribs like lightning, forcing me back down against the pillows. My throat was sandpaper. My thoughts moved through molasses. For a terrifying moment, I couldn't remember my own name. Then it came back. Mia. Mia Blackwell. 29 years old. Portland, Oregon. The accident. Oh God, the accident. Fragments flickered through my mind. Headlights, screaming metal, the sickening crunch of impact. My hands had been on the steering wheel. I'd been driving home late from the office. Again. Always working late, always proving myself, always hoping that maybe this time they'd finally see me. You're awake. A nurse appeared beside my bed, her expression professionally neutral. Not warm, not cold. Just there. She checked my vitals with practiced efficiency, jotting notes on a tablet without making eye contact. How long? My voice came out as a croak. 3 months, she said simply. You were in a medically induced coma. Severe internal injuries, broken ribs, punctured lung. You're lucky to be alive. 3 months. 12 weeks of my life, just gone. Where's my family? The question tumbled out before I could stop it, desperate and pathetic. My father? My brother? Something flickered across her face. Pity, maybe, or discomfort. There's a note, she said quietly, nodding toward the tray table beside my bed. They left instructions that you were to receive it when you woke up. My hand shook as I reached for the small white envelope. My father's name embossed on the back, Gregory Blackwell, in that pretentious gold lettering he loved so much. Inside, a single piece of cardstock. 7 words in his sharp, efficient handwriting. Medical bills are your responsibility now. GB. I read it 3 times, convinced I was misunderstanding. Convinced the coma had scrambled my brain and I wasn't processing correctly. But no. The meaning was crystal clear. They'd left me. While I was unconscious and helpless, fighting for my life in a hospital bed, my own family had simply walked away. Cut me loose. Abandoned me like I was nothing more than a bad investment they'd finally decided to write off. The nurse touched my shoulder gently. I'm sorry, honey. I really am. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The shock was too complete, too overwhelming. I just sat there, staring at those 7 words until they blurred into meaningless ink. That's when the door opened again. Mia Blackwell. The man who stepped into my hospital room didn't look like he belonged there. Mid-50s, immaculate charcoal suit, leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Everything about him screamed expensive lawyer, the kind who charged by the minute and made every second count. Behind him, a younger woman followed, early 30s, sharp eyes, carrying a slim laptop case. She had the look of someone who missed nothing, catalogued everything. My name is Thomas Whitaker, the man said, his voice smooth and measured. I was your mother's estate attorney. This is Amanda Chen, my associate. We've been waiting for you to wake up. Your mother's estate attorney. The words hit me like a physical blow. My mother. Catherine Blackwell. Dead for 6 years now, taken by cancer that ate through her faster than anyone expected. I'd been 23 when we buried her, too young to understand everything I was losing. I don't understand, I managed. My mother's estate was settled years ago. My father got everything. That's what he told me. Thomas and Amanda exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. That's not entirely accurate, Thomas said carefully. He pulled a chair beside my bed, settling in like he planned to stay a while. Your father received control of certain assets, yes. But your mother was, shall we say, more strategic than anyone realized. Amanda opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Your mother came to our firm 18 months before she died. She was very specific about what she wanted done, and more importantly, when it should be activated. Activated. I repeated stupidly. Nothing made sense. My head still felt packed with cotton, my thoughts sluggish and disconnected. Thomas opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick manila folder. Mia, your mother established a trust. A very particular kind of trust, with very particular conditions. He laid the folder on my lap. I could see my mother's signature at the bottom of several pages, that flowing script I remembered from birthday cards and permission slips. Real. Undeniable. What kind of conditions? The trust was designed to protect you, Amanda said, her voice gentler than her sharp appearance suggested. Your mother was worried about what might happen after she was gone. She saw how things were shifting in the family dynamic, particularly between your father and his new wife. Vivian. Of course. My father had remarried barely a year after Mom died, Vivian Ashford, a corporate attorney 15 years his junior with ice in her veins and ambition in her DNA. She'd brought her own son into the marriage too, Blake, a year older than me, smug and entitled and somehow instantly beloved by my father in ways I'd never been. Your mother predicted, Thomas continued, that there might come a time when your father would attempt to remove you from the family business entirely, particularly if you were ever in a vulnerable position. The hospital room suddenly felt very cold. The trust was set up with a trigger condition, Amanda explained. If your father ever abandoned you during a medical emergency, specifically, if you withdrew financial support while you were incapacitated and unable to advocate for yourself, full control of your mother's assets would transfer to you immediately. I stared at them both. What assets? Dad said everything went to him. Thomas smiled, and for the first time, I saw something fierce behind his professional mask. Your father received the house, the cars, the visible assets. What he didn't receive was your mother's stake in Blackwell Technologies. The room tilted. Blackwell Technologies. The software company my parents had built together from nothing, back when they were young and brilliant and in love. The company that now dominated the cybersecurity industry, with contracts running from Fortune 500 corporations to government agencies. The company where I'd worked in obscurity for 7 years, coding in a basement office while my stepbrother Blake took credit for my innovations in boardrooms upstairs. My mother owned stock. I whispered. 43%, Amanda said. Held in a blind trust your father couldn't touch. With voting rights that activate the moment the trigger condition is met. Thomas leaned forward. Mia, when your father left that note, when he refused to pay your medical bills while you were in a coma, he activated your mother's failsafe. As of 3 days ago, you control the largest single voting block in Blackwell Technologies. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. How much? I croaked. How much is it worth? Thomas and Amanda exchanged another look. Current market valuation, Thomas said quietly, approximately $950 million. I threw up. Not the most dignified response to finding out you're suddenly worth nearly $1 billion, but my body didn't care about dignity. The nurse came running, helped me lean over basin, rubbed my back while I retched up nothing but bile and shock. When I finally stopped shaking, Thomas and Amanda were still there, patient and professional, waiting. I don't understand, I said for probably the 10th time. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why did Mom keep this secret? She couldn't tell you, Thomas explained. If your father had known you were the beneficiary, he would have found ways to prevent the trigger from ever happening. This had to stay buried until the moment it mattered most. Amanda pulled up a document on her laptop, turned it so I could see. Your mother started planning this the moment she got her diagnosis. She knew she wouldn't be there to protect you, so she built protection into the legal structure itself. I scanned the document, my mother's words jumping out at me. Gregory will try to erase her. He always erases what he can't control. But Mia is brilliant, more brilliant than he'll ever admit. She deserves what we built together. Tears burned behind my eyes. My mother had seen it all. The favoritism toward Blake. Vivian's subtle poisoning of my relationship with Dad. The way I was slowly being pushed out of the family business despite doing the actual work that kept it running. There's a complication, Thomas said, his tone shifting to something more urgent. The annual shareholders meeting is in 72 hours. In San Francisco. Your father is planning to announce a major restructuring that will effectively consolidate his power and eliminate any chance of opposition. He doesn't know about the trust. He has no idea, Amanda confirmed. But once that restructuring goes through, undoing it becomes exponentially harder. We need to move now. I looked down at my body, weak, broken, barely able to sit up without pain screaming through my torso. I can't even walk to the bathroom by myself." "You don't need to walk," Thomas said. "You just need to show up." Over the next hour, they laid out the plan. It was audacious, probably crazy, and absolutely terrifying. We'd gather evidence of my contributions to Blackwell Technologies, all the code I'd written, the systems I'd designed, the patents filed under my name but credited to Blake in company presentations. My mother had apparently been documenting everything, leaving a paper trail that Thomas's firm had been quietly maintaining for years. "We have emails," Amanda said, pulling up files. "Correspondence between your mother and the head of R&D meeting minutes where she specifically noted your innovations. Even security logs showing when you were in the building working on projects Blake claimed as his own. There's also this," Thomas added, handing me a small plastic card. I turned it over. An access badge. My photo, but a security clearance level I'd never possessed, executive access, Tier 1. The kind of badge that opened every door in Blackwell Technologies. "Your mother had it made years ago," Thomas said softly. "She wanted you to have it when the time came." My fingers closed around the badge, the plastic edges cutting into my palm. All those years I'd worked in the basement, using a low-level employee badge that barely got me past the lobby. Meanwhile, my mother had been planning for this moment, building an arsenal I never knew existed. "What happens when I show up at the shareholders' meeting?" I asked. Amanda didn't sugarcoat it. "War. Your father will fight back with everything he has. Vivian will lawyer up immediately. Blake will probably have a public meltdown. The board will fracture. It's going to be ugly." "Good," I heard myself say. The word surprised me, coming out harder and colder than I intended. But I meant it. I was done being invisible. Done being erased. Done letting them steal everything my mother and I had built. Thomas smiled grimly. "Then let's get you ready." They moved me to a different hospital the next morning, somewhere private, discreet, where the Blackwell name carried no weight and my father's connections meant nothing. Thomas had arranged everything, a suite instead of a room, private nurses, physical therapists who worked me like I was training for the Olympics instead of just trying to walk without passing out. Every muscle in my body screamed. The broken ribs made breathing an exercise in torture. But I pushed through it because I had 72 hours, and 72 hours wasn't nearly enough time to prepare for what I was about to do. Amanda became my constant shadow. While the physical therapists rebuilt my body, she rebuilt my case. We sat for hours in that private suite, going through document after document, years of my work, meticulously catalogued. "Look at this," she said, pulling up an email dated 4 years ago. "You sent Blake a complete security protocol for the Henderson account. 3 weeks later, he presented it to the board as his own innovation. Got a promotion and a $50,000 bonus." I remembered that. Remembered how he'd thanked me with a Starbucks gift card and a patronizing pat on the shoulder. "Team effort," he'd said, like I was lucky to be included at all. Henderson was just the beginning, Amanda continued, clicking through files. "The Morrison encryption system? Yours. The automated threat response framework the Department of Defense uses? Yours. The entire cloud migration strategy that saved the company $15 million last year? Also yours." The evidence was overwhelming. I'd spent 7 years being the ghost in the machine, the invisible architect behind Blackwell Technologies' biggest successes. And Blake had spent 7 years taking credit, climbing the corporate ladder on work he'd never been smart enough to create himself. "We need more than documents," Thomas said, joining us from a phone call he'd been taking in the hallway. "We need witnesses." "Witnesses," I repeated. "People inside Blackwell who know the truth. Who've seen you do the work. Who'll testify to the board about what really happens behind closed doors." I thought about that. Most people at Blackwell ignored me. I was just the quiet girl in the basement, Gregory Blackwell's disappointing daughter, the one who didn't have Blake's charisma or his last name. Vivian had made sure Blake kept the Ashford name, a constant reminder that he wasn't really part of the Blackwell legacy, even as Dad treated him like the golden child. But there had been a few people. Co-workers who'd actually noticed. Engineers who'd asked me questions when they got stuck. The night security guard who'd seen me working at 3 a.m. more times than I could count. "I know someone," I said slowly. "Ray Martinez. He runs building security. Works the overnight shift." Amanda's fingers were already flying across her keyboard. Raymond Martinez, 52. Been with Blackwell for 19 years. Clean record. no disciplinary issues. Would he talk? I thought about Ray, the way he'd always made a point to check on me during those late nights, bringing me coffee from the break room, making sure I got to my car safely. He'd never treated me like I was invisible. He might, I said, if we ask. Thomas made the call. Turned out, Ray had been keeping his own records, a security log that documented every time I'd entered the building, every hour I'd spent working while Blake partied in Aspen or vacationed in the Hamptons. He'd been doing it for years, just in case someone ever needed proof. People notice more than you think, Ray told me over speakerphone, his gravelly voice kind. You were always there, always working. We all knew who kept that place running. By the second day, we had something more than just a case. We had a weapon. Amanda created a presentation, clinical, devastating, impossible to deny. Side-by-side comparisons of my original code and Blake's innovations. Timeline analyses showing when I'd submitted work and when Blake had presented it. Testimony from Ray and 3 other employees who'd agreed to speak up. This is going to destroy your family, Thomas warned me, late on the second night. Once this goes public, there's no walking it back. Your relationship with your father, with Blake, with Vivian, it's all over. I looked out the window of the suite, watching Portland's lights flicker in the darkness. My family. The people who'd left me to die alone in a hospital bed because paying my bills was inconvenient. The people who'd stolen my work, my credit, my future, and smiled while doing it. They destroyed us first, I said quietly. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. The San Francisco Hilton's Grand Ballroom could hold 800 people. For the Blackwell Technologies annual shareholders meeting, it was packed to capacity. Investors, board members, tech journalists, financial analysts, all waiting to hear Gregory Blackwell's vision for the company's future. I watched from the service hallway, hidden behind a curtain, as my father took the stage. He looked exactly like I remembered, tall, commanding, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing one of his $15,000 suits like armor. The crowd gave him a standing ovation before he'd even said a word. Thank you, he said, his voice booming through the sound system. Thank you all for being here. Today, I'm excited to announce the next evolution of Blackwell Technologies. Beside him, Blake stood ready, probably rehearsing whatever speech Dad had written for him. Vivian sat in the front row, perfectly composed in a white Chanel suit, looking like she'd already won. They had no idea I was there. Amanda touched my elbow. Ready. My legs were shaking. The ribs still hurt with every breath. I'd needed help getting dressed this morning, had almost passed out in the car on the way to the hotel. Everything in my body screamed that I wasn't ready for this. But my mother had been ready. She'd planned for this moment years ago, knowing I'd need the strength she'd built for me. I stepped out from behind the curtain. The gasp that went through the ballroom sounded like a wave crashing. 800 people inhaling at once. My father's head snapped toward me. His face went from confident to confused to absolutely white in the span of 3 seconds. Mia, he said, his voice cracking through the microphone. What are you doing here? I walked slowly across the stage, each step carefully measured, trying not to limp, trying not to show how much this hurt. Thomas and Amanda flanked me on either side, ready to catch me if I fell. I took the microphone from the podium. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Hello, everyone, I said. My voice echoed through the ballroom, clear and strong. I'm Mia Blackwell, Gregory's daughter. Some of you might not recognize me. I've been away. In a coma, actually. For 3 months. The silence was absolute. I woke up 5 days ago, I continued. Alone in a hospital room. No family. No visitors. Just this. I held up the note. My father's handwriting, projected onto the massive screens behind us so everyone could see. Medical bills are your responsibility now. GB. Someone in the audience actually gasped. That's private correspondence, my father hissed, reaching for the microphone. You have no right. I have every right. I cut him off. Because this note, this abandonment while I was unconscious and unable to defend myself, activated a clause in my mother's trust. A clause that transferred her 43% stake in Blackwell Technologies directly to me. The ballroom erupted. Voices overlapping, questions shouted, journalists frantically typing. My father stood frozen, understanding dawning across his face. That's impossible, Vivian's voice rang out from the front row. She was standing now, her composure finally cracking. Catherine's estate was settled years ago. This is fraud. Thomas stepped forward, his lawyer voice cutting through the chaos. Mrs. Blackwell Ashford, I have all the documentation right here. Filed with the SEC years ago, completely legal and binding. Ms. Blackwell is now the majority shareholder. This is insane, Blake sputtered. You can't just walk in here and... I didn't just walk in, I said, looking directly at my stepbrother. I built this company. While you were taking credit for my innovations, I was doing the actual work. Amanda cued the presentation. The screens behind us filled with evidence, code comparisons, emails, timelines. Everything we'd compiled over the past 3 days. The Henderson Protocol, I said, pointing to the screen. Blake presented this as his innovation 4 years ago. But here's the original code, written by me, with metadata proving creation date and authorship. Click. Next slide. The Morrison encryption system. The DoD cloud migration. The automated threat response framework. All mine. All presented by Blake as his own work. All documented, time-stamped, and verified. I watched Blake's face go from red to white to green. Watched him look desperately at my father, at Vivian, at anyone who might save him. Nobody moved. You stole my work, I said, my voice quiet now but somehow carrying through the absolute silence. You stole my credit. You stole my future. And you did it while my father watched and approved because I wasn't the child he wanted. My father finally found his voice. This is completely inappropriate. You're clearly not well, Mia. This kind of delusion, this paranoia, it's exactly why we needed to protect the company from me. I interrupted. You mean from the person who actually keeps this company running? From the daughter who spent 7 years in a basement office while you gave Blake the executive suite? From the one who loved you enough to keep working even when you made it clear I'd never be good enough? Something flickered in his eyes. Shame, maybe. Or just anger at being exposed. A board member stood. Margaret Chen, one of the original investors. I'd like to call for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current leadership. Seconded, another board member said. Wait, my father started. But it was too late. The vote happened right there, hands raising across the room. It wasn't even close. The hotel security had to escort my father out. He kept trying to approach me, to say something, apologize, threaten, explain, I wasn't sure. Vivian left before the vote was even finished, Blake trailing behind her like a lost puppy. Their dynasty collapsed in less than 20 minutes. I didn't feel victorious. Mostly, I just felt tired. The board wanted to meet with me immediately, but Thomas intervened. Ms. Blackwell needs rest. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. Amanda helped me back to the service elevator, away from the journalists and investors who wanted a piece of me now that I mattered. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely stand. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving nothing but pain and exhaustion. You did it, Amanda said softly. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not really. The next 24 hours were a blur. Emergency board meetings. Conference calls with lawyers. Journalists camped outside the hotel. My phone, which had been sitting unused in a hospital drawer for 3 months, suddenly exploded with messages. Some from people I'd worked with at Blackwell, offering support. Some from distant relatives I barely knew, suddenly interested in reconnecting. Most I deleted without reading. The board voted to remove my father, Vivian, and Blake from all positions of authority. Blake was reassigned to a junior developer role, basically the same position I'd been trapped in for 7 years. Maybe he'd learn what real work felt like. Probably not, but I could hope. They offered me the CEO position. I turned it down. I'm not ready for that, I told Margaret Chen honestly. I'm good at building systems, at solving problems. But running the whole company? That's not me. Not yet. Instead, I took the CTO role. Chief Technology Officer. The position my mother had held before cancer took her. It felt right, somehow. Like completing a circle she'd started. 3 days after the shareholders' meeting, I flew back to Portland. Not to the Blackwell family estate where I'd grown up, that was my father's now, and I had no desire to see it again. Instead, I checked into a modest hotel downtown and Saturday. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "I'm proud of you. You fought back. That takes courage. Ray Martinez." The security guard who'd kept records, who'd noticed me when everyone else looked away. I saved his number, sent back a simple thank you. Another text. This one from Blake. "You destroyed everything. I hope you're happy." I stared at it for a long time. Then deleted it without responding. Blake still didn't understand. I hadn't destroyed anything, I'd just stopped letting him destroy me. That night, I did something I hadn't done since the accident. I opened my laptop and started coding. Not for Blackwell Technologies, not for anyone but myself. Just building something, creating something, feeling my fingers move across the keyboard the way they had when my mother first taught me to program at age 12. She'd sat beside me, patient and encouraging, showing me how logical thinking could become elegant code. "You're brilliant, Mia," she'd said. "Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." I'd forgotten that. Somewhere in the years of being overlooked and undervalued, I'd started to believe I was what they said I was, not quite good enough, not quite right, not quite worthy of the Blackwell name. But my mother had seen the truth. She'd known what I was capable of, and she'd built a failsafe to make sure I'd have the chance to prove it. "I did it, Mom," I whispered to the empty hotel room. "I put us back where we belong." For the first time since waking up from the coma, I felt her presence, not as grief or loss, but as strength. As proof that some things, some people, some legacies, can't be erased no matter how hard others try. 6 months later, I stood in a very different boardroom than the one where I'd confronted my father. This one was smaller, more intimate, Blackwell Technologies executive suite, redesigned to my specifications. Natural light instead of harsh fluorescence. Plants in the corners. Whiteboards covered with code instead of corporate buzzwords. "The new security protocol is ready for testing," Marcus Thompson said, my new head of development. "Thanks to your architecture, we're looking at response times 40% faster than the industry standard." I studied the schematics he'd presented. Marcus was brilliant, one of the people who'd been buried under Blake's mismanagement, finally given the chance to shine. I'd promoted 3 other engineers from the basement ranks too. People who actually did the work instead of just talking about it. "Let's run it through the simulation first," I said. "If it holds up, we'll present to the DOD next week." Margaret Chen joined us, reviewing the quarterly reports. Profits were up 18% since the restructuring. Turns out, when you actually put competent people in charge of their areas of expertise, companies tend to do better. "Your mother would be proud," Margaret said quietly, after the others had left. "She built this company from nothing, and watching your father slowly corrupt it nearly killed her before the cancer did." I hadn't known that. There was a lot I hadn't known about my mother's final years, how much she'd seen, how much she'd prepared for. "Did she ever say anything?" I asked. "About me? About why she set up the trust the way she did?" Margaret smiled, sad and warm at the same time. "She said you were exactly like her. Brilliant, but too kind for your own good. She was afraid your father would use that kindness against you, would make you doubt yourself until you disappeared entirely. The trust was her way of making sure you had weapons when you needed them." Weapons. That's exactly what it had been, a legal arsenal, built with love and foresight, waiting for the moment when I'd need to defend myself. My father had tried to fight the board's decision. Vivian had lawyered up, threatened lawsuits, made a lot of noise. But the evidence was too overwhelming, the documentation too complete. They'd lost before they'd even started fighting. I heard he'd moved to Arizona. Bought a house with what money he had left after Vivian divorced him. Blake was still in Portland, still technically employed at Blackwell, though he avoided me like I carried the plague. That was fine. I had no interest in revenge beyond what had already happened. I wasn't the one who'd destroyed the family. I just stopped letting them destroy me. The difference mattered. That evening, I drove to the cemetery where my mother was buried. I hadn't visited since the funeral, too painful, too raw. But now I needed to. Her headstone was simple, Catherine and Blackwell. Innovator. Mother. Visionary. I sat in the grass beside it, not caring that the moisture soaked through my jeans. "I'm running the tech division now," I told her. "The board keeps asking when I'll be ready for CEO, but I don't know if I want that. I like building things." Like you did. The wind rustled through the trees overhead. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang. Everyone keeps calling what happened a hostile takeover. But it wasn't hostile, it was necessary. You knew that. You planned for it. I traced my fingers over her name on the stone. Thank you, I whispered. For seeing me when no one else did. For believing I was worth protecting. For building me a way out when I couldn't see one myself. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. I stayed until the light faded, talking to my mother the way I used to when she was alive, about code and innovation and the future we were building, one line at a time. When I finally stood to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from Thomas Whitaker. Final legal paperwork is complete. Everything's officially in your name. Your mother's legacy is secure. I looked back at the headstone one more time. We did it, Mom, I said softly. We put everything back where it belongs. The truth is, silence isn't weakness. It's the space where truth gathers its strength. I'd been silent for 7 years, invisible and overlooked, while my family tried to erase me. But silence had given me time to learn, to build, to become exactly what my mother knew I could be. And when the moment came, when they finally pushed too far, abandoned me too completely, that silence erupted into something they couldn't ignore or dismiss or steal. I didn't destroy my family. I simply stopped letting them destroy me. And what remained wasn't revenge. It was restoration. My mother's name stood exactly where she'd intended it to be. My work was finally acknowledged. And the company we'd built together, the one they tried to take, was back in the hands of someone who understood what it was really for. Not power. Not money. Not corporate ladder climbing or executive posturing. But innovation. Creation. Building something that mattered. That's the legacy Catherine Blackwell left behind. And I finally understood, I was always meant to carry it forward.